When Russian President Vladimir Putin ordered the invasion of Ukraine in 2022, he was confident that his so-called special military operation would succeed. It's easy to understand why. Putin had the larger army, the stronger economy, and a seemingly endless supply of soldiers and military hardware to get the job done. Yet as the war raged on, year after year, the Kremlin's resources began to diminish. Tanks and infantry vehicles were wiped out. Fleets shrank, defenses dwindled. And now, at long last, Putin is running out of perhaps the most vital military resource of them all: people. And without people who are willing to put on helmets, strap up their boots, and march into fearsome frontline kill zones, laying their lives on the line for the glory of the motherland, Russia has zero chance of winning this war. Putin never saw this coming. When the war began, Russia had one of the largest armies on Earth, with an estimated 900,000 active duty personnel and hundreds of thousands more paramilitary personnel in reserve. Ukraine's army, by contrast, had fewer than 200,000 troops. Historical trends show that invading forces tend to suffer more casualties than defenders, for various reasons, so Russia's commanders likely expected to see a certain number of losses. But they couldn't have possibly imagined the sheer scale of the casualties that lay ahead for their army. As Ukraine defied the odds and demonstrated remarkable resilience, Russia's losses started to mount. In the early stages of the war, the Kremlin suffered several thousand casualties a month. By 2023, that figure had risen to around 15 to 20,000. In 2024, it broke the 30,000 mark, even briefly surpassing 40,000 towards the end of the year. 2025 saw similarly devastating losses, averaging around 30,000 per month, and that has continued right into 2026. To put that figure into perspective, during the Soviet-Afghan War, which ran from 1979 through to 1989, the Soviets lost between 15 and 20,000 troops total, over the span of almost a decade. Now Russia loses more than that every single month. In total, it's estimated to have suffered over 1.3 million casualties, with an estimated 500,000 dead and almost a million more wounded. That figure is over 5 times greater than the country's total losses from all Russian and Soviet wars since World War II combined, including the Afghan War and 2 Chechen wars. As the Center for Strategic and International Studies notes, Russia has endured more losses than any major power in any war since World War II. Yet perhaps the most staggering fact of all is that these horrific losses were actually seen as sustainable in the eyes of Putin and his Kremlin cronies for the first few years of the conflict. It didn't matter that tens of thousands of Russian soldiers were being sent home in body bags. It didn't matter that brothers, sons, husbands, and fathers were being slaughtered en masse or suffering life-changing injuries. It didn't matter because the army was still advancing, albeit quite slowly in most areas, and there were always more recruits ready and waiting to replenish the ranks. In fact, the Russian army actually managed to get even larger during the opening years of the war, thanks to a partial mobilization in 2022 and heavy investment in recruitment in the years that followed. Countless able-bodied men across the country willingly signed up to fight in Ukraine. Most were led to believe that the war would be over and done with in no time, or that they'd only need to serve a few months before packing their bags and heading back home. Many were fooled into thinking that they could make some easy money by signing up, serving somewhere relatively safe, far from the front, and then heading home to enjoy the fruits of their labor. Some, meanwhile, were blackmailed or effectively forced to sign up, with Russian recruiters resorting to some very underhanded tactics, like pressuring ethnic minorities and threatening people with deportation if they refused to sign contracts. The methods didn't really matter. As long as enough new soldiers were entering the army to compensate for its casualties, then the Kremlin's war machine could continue its relentless assault on Ukraine. But this couldn't continue forever. Even in a country with a population of over 140 million people, there's only a finite number of able-bodied individuals who are actually willing and ready to join the fray. And the more time that went by, the more those same individuals began to realize that if they did sign up, they'd more than likely be signing their own death sentence in the process. So recruitment became more challenging, and Russia became more desperate. It went beyond blackmail, dragging rapists and murderers out of their prison cells and offering them their freedom if they'd agree to do a year at the front. It sent people with debilitating and terminal illnesses into the fray. It began new military marketing campaigns filled with lies and propaganda aimed at tricking struggling students into going to war, telling them that it would be just like playing a video game and promising that they could safely serve far from the front lines. It started issuing orders for schools and businesses to actively seek out students and employees and make them sign military contracts. It even began looking beyond its borders, leveraging its influence across Africa to fool thousands of people of other nationalities into fighting a war that they had no stake in, risking their lives for a country that didn't care about them. Out on the battlefield too, Russian commanders became more ruthless and brutal in the way they treated the troops under their command, torturing, beating, and exploiting those who show even the slightest hint of wanting to desert. But none of this was enough to stem the flow of casualties and stop the Russian army from slowly but surely starting to shrink. The numbers prove it. In December 2025, for the first time since the war began, Russia officially lost more troops than it was able to recruit, with 22,000 new personnel either recruited or mobilized compared to over 30,000 confirmed casualties. Optimists hoped that this was the start of something special. Pessimists feared it might just be a one-off, an isolated incident that was worthy of a celebration but unlikely to have much of an impact in the long term. Then came January 2026 and the same thing happened. And again in February, March, and April. For 5 entire months running, Russia's casualty rate exceeded its recruitment rate. This wasn't a one-off, it was a trend, and it's now becoming a trend that Russia is struggling to find any answers for as its recruitment strategies fail to generate sufficient results and its battlefield tactics continue to cause devastating losses. Indeed, in February 2026, on the 4th anniversary of the invasion, The Economist published its own modelling of Russian casualties, concluding that the country had suffered as many losses in the previous 12 months as it had suffered in the first 3 years of the war combined. In other words, losses are skyrocketing, right as recruitment begins to decline. It's a recipe for disaster for the Kremlin, and with some estimates suggesting that around 1,000 Russian soldiers are wiped out every single day, either killed, wounded or captured, the country's army is almost guaranteed to get weaker and smaller the longer the war goes on. And the picture gets even uglier for Putin when we compare the country's casualties to those of Ukraine. Early on, of course, Ukraine did indeed suffer serious losses. The opening months were brutal on Kyiv's forces as they struggled to come to terms with the weight and ferocity of Russia's invasion. With enemies attacking from several sides, Ukraine's soldiers and brave civilian volunteers struggled to find their feet. The country's failed counteroffensive in 2023 was also a low point, leading to large numbers of deaths and wounded troops too. However, as the war progressed, Ukraine found ways to limit its losses. It shifted more towards drone warfare. It received game-changing aid from its Western allies, and its commanders adjusted their tactics accordingly, making the most of the resources at their disposal and refusing to copy the Kremlin playbook of simply treating soldiers like cannon fodder. As a result, the latter stages of the war have been significantly better for Ukraine, with a reduction in the number of casualties per month. In a way, the two countries have followed completely opposing paths. Ukraine had a poor start to the war but got better as time went by. Russia started strong but has since suffered a dramatic drop-off. So what does all of this mean for the next phase of the war? Before we get into that, there's more where this came from. So if you're getting value from the military show, don't forget to subscribe. Facing such serious losses and recruitment challenges, many leaders would understand that now is the time to swallow their pride and potentially look at either starting ceasefire negotiations or at least reassessing their military objectives. But that's not Vladimir Putin's style. According to numerous reports and even insider officials within the Kremlin who have spoken to Western journalists on the condition of anonymity, the Russian president remains stubbornly set on seizing the Donbass and persisting with the war for the foreseeable future. One official even claimed that they have been pushing Putin to simply call the war off and take the territory it's gained so far. According to them, however, he keeps saying, "No, I can't compromise on this." Putin even seems to think that the Donbass can be completely captured by the fall. The data, however, suggests otherwise. Because Russian forces aren't just losing men in massive quantities, they're also massively struggling to take territory with any sort of speed. According to data from the Institute for the Study of War, for example, Russian forces have captured around 220 square kilometers, 85 square miles in 2026 so far. That's about the same size as the city of Seattle. In response, Ukraine has managed to recapture around 189 square kilometers, 73 square miles. That gives Russia a net gain of just 31 square kilometers, or 12 square miles in 2026. That's virtually nothing. And the worst part is that Russia has paid an extortionate price for that nothing. Some estimates suggest that over 300 Russian soldiers have been killed or seriously wounded for every square kilometer of land taken in the Donbass region so far this year, and the number of deaths is actually becoming significantly larger than the number of injuries. That is extremely bad news for the Kremlin. In fact, it's almost unprecedented. Typically, in modern warfare, casualties tend to be made up mostly of wounded soldiers. There are usually 3 troops wounded for every 1 killed, to be precise. In some cases, the ratio is even higher. In Iraq, for example, the US suffered around 7 wounded troops for every death, meaning that the vast majority of the country's casualties weren't actually deaths but injuries, with many of those soldiers eventually being able to make full or partial recoveries and return home to their families. In Russia, the ratio has been inverted. For years, the country's meat grinder tactics meant that it suffered a higher than average number of deaths, with around 2 Russian soldiers wounded for each one that died. But according to some more recent reports, it's now looking like Russia is suffering 2 deaths for every injury, with Ukrainian sources stating that around 62% of all Russian casualties are kills, with the remaining 38% being injuries. That's one of the deadliest kill-to-wounded ratios in modern history. Of course, Ukrainian officials have plenty of reasons to exaggerate or pick and choose statistics that align with their agenda, but there is an increasingly large amount of compelling evidence to back up their claims, and it all boils down to one single thing: drones. The Russia-Ukraine war has, in many ways, become a drone war. The front lines are absolutely saturated with unmanned aerial vehicles, or UAVs. They soar through the skies, scanning the ground for any signs of life before striking with precision and impunity at any enemy targets they find, and they don't just operate along the front itself, but several miles either side of it. As a result, for Russian troops, it's almost become a coin toss of whether they even make it to the front lines in one piece or not. For the lucky few who do get there, more drones are just waiting to pick them off. Many die immediately in the explosive blasts caused by kamikaze drones. In a way, they're the lucky ones, because those who are wounded are often simply stranded in no man's land, slowly bleeding out from their injuries, unable to be aided or evacuated, because Russian medics are also forced to navigate those same treacherous territories, evading entire swarms of drones just to get close enough to provide any sort of assistance to their wounded comrades. As Phillips O'Brien, professor of strategic studies and head of the School of International Relations at the University of St Andrews, notes, if the Ukrainians are now killing 2 Russian soldiers for every 1 wounded, that will be notable in warfare. It does not seem implausible to me because of the accuracy of first-person view drones, and the fact that the battlefield makes it very difficult indeed for wounded soldiers to be evacuated. Of course, this problem isn't limited only to Russia. Ukraine also has to deal with enemy drones along the front lines. It also has to worry about how to evacuate injured soldiers without putting more lives at risk in the process. But unlike Russia, which persists with the same stubborn and wasteful tactics, treating its troops like pieces of meat rather than human beings, Ukraine has adapted. It's found smarter and more effective ways to solve the challenges it faces, like using unmanned ground vehicles to assist with evacs, for example. Ukraine has also moved ahead of Russia in the drone race, developing a more diverse and impactful arsenal of UAVs to outwit and overwhelm its opponent. This is the biggest and most vital difference between the two sides. Russia sees problems but doesn't actually search for solutions. It just throws more men at them and hopes they'll go away. Ukraine sees problems and finds ways to fix them. It never settles, always looking for ways to improve, to become more efficient and minimize its losses. And what this all means moving forward is that the trends we've seen so far in 2026 are likely to continue. Russia is going to continue losing upwards of 30,000 troops per month. In fact, Ukraine's military leaders are eager to push that number even higher, all the way to 40 or even 50,000 towards the end of the year. If they can get anywhere close to that target, it will be devastating for the Kremlin. Russia will almost certainly continue to struggle to recruit soldiers in the quantities it needs to counterbalance its casualties, and it's not hard to see why. The Russian people may have been easily duped at the start of this war, but after 4 years and countless failures, many of them are now able to see right through the Kremlin's lies. They know that the war has become a disaster, and many of them want no part in it. Even those who do sign up aren't exactly the best of the best. They're often people from ethnic minority communities who felt pressured to fight, people who are sick or have criminal records, people from other countries who don't even speak a word of Russian, or people who felt like they were left with no other choice, but don't have any kind of military experience or training to speak of. So when they get to Ukraine, the vast majority will continue to die, joining the hundreds of thousands of their countrymen who have already fallen before them. As a result, the Russian army will get progressively smaller and weaker, and there's no way for Putin to stop that decline, apart from some sort of mass mobilization, which would be greeted with extreme anger among the public. With Putin's popularity in freefall, he can't really risk incurring the public's wrath any further, leaving him stuck between a rock and a hard place with no obvious escape route. As the army grows weaker, its progress will most likely continue to stagnate and stall along the front lines, with only tiny pockets of land captured in exchange for thousands of lost lives. This, in turn, may open opportunities for Ukrainian forces to exploit. As their enemy weakens, they might find it easier to recapture even more territory, pushing the Russians further back and squashing Putin's hopes of a complete Donbass capture by the end of the year. At the same time, it's important to note that Ukraine also has its problems. As Lawrence Friedman, professor of war studies at King's College London, recently stated, while problems are mounting for Russia, Ukraine has also got serious issues. Chief among those is Kyiv's ongoing inability to recruit enough troops, resulting in a relatively porous front line, policed largely by drones. So both sides are facing recruitment challenges, and if Ukraine can't get the soldiers it needs, it too may struggle to make gains at the front. On balance, however, Russia has far greater and more numerous issues than Ukraine right now. Its losses are vast, its progress is slow, its economy is in crisis, its leadership is in turmoil, its allies have abandoned it, and the man in charge of the whole show, Putin himself, appears increasingly out of touch with reality. 500,000 of his people have already died, and he appears to have no qualms about sacrificing hundreds of thousands more. The only question left is how long will the rest of Russia stand for it? You can learn more about how the war is shifting in Ukraine's favor in this video, which explores Kyiv's recent successful strike on the Novorossiysk naval base, or watch this video to learn how Ukraine located and eliminated a Russian intelligence agency base, taking out up to 100 enemy soldiers and officers in the process. Don't forget to subscribe to The Military Show for more content like this, and thank you, as always, for watching.